Good afternoon, everyone. This is Chris Riley, System Source. Thanks so much for spending your lunchtime with us today. I'm joined today by Sean Roberts with Arctic Wolf, and we'll be going over some good security information today, but really regarding how do you kind of make your IT environment a lot more resilient for the cyber attacks, which seem to be coming regardless. So we want to make sure that our environments are really protected, and that if something bad happens, that it can be prevented and also recovered from. So we'll be diving into that today. A little bit on the agenda. So we'll talk a little bit about a cyber resilience assessment. So it gives you a kind of a tool to understand where you are, so you can kind of assess where you are. You can prioritize what you need to, so that you can kind of mitigate those risks, as well as be able to track the progress for how you're going, which is really important. So a lot of times we get a report, well, how did we do? So that we'll talk about that cyber resilience assessment today. We'll talk about insurability. So what are cyber insurance carriers looking for? And what are they prioritizing that they want to see that we've done when we're applying for cyber insurance? That kind of constitutes our risk profile. So the more that we can do beforehand lowers the premiums, and also may make all the difference between whether we are insurable, period. We'll talk about how to communicate up both to our leadership, our board, and insurers. We'll talk about an incident response plan, and then we'll talk about tools that help proactively protect our IT environment on a 7x24 basis. Hopefully you have your pizza right now. If you don't, go ahead and jot Mike Jones's email address there. Just jot that down, and you can go ahead and email Mike at any point if that pizza has not shown up. But you may want to be a little bit patient. If the driver may be still trying to find your office or find your home if you're working from home. You can also kind of check wherever food makes it in your office. If you're at the office, sometimes these pizzas get spirited away. So check there, but you can always reach out to Mike for help. Some housekeeping during the webinar today. So the audio is in presentation mode. So you're hearing me now. You'll hear Sean shortly. But we can't hear you, but we do that on purpose, so any background noise where participants may be, or if they dialed in, they need to put it on hold, that we don't hear music on hold coming through to the whole group. However, I'll be monitoring the chat throughout today's session, as well as the questions tab, so you can always get a hold of me. If you'll put any questions that come to mind right into the Q&A section of the GoToWebinar tab, I'll be monitoring those, and then Sean will be able to respond to those during the Q&A at the end of the presentation. So at any point, you can drop things right in there. This presentation, as well as the recording, will be sent out to you by email, so that you don't have to write furiously. It is coming your way. And then finally, after today's session, you'll get a brief message for an evaluation. If you can take a moment to do that, it lets us know how we did and how we can do better, more importantly. And we try to make it a little bit fun by doing a couple drawings for either your choice of an Amazon gift card for $50 or $50 to your favorite restaurant, just as a way of saying thanks for taking the literally just a couple minutes or so to do the evaluation, as well as it gives you a place to say what else can we do to give you a hand. So some of the things you'll see there will be a cyber the cyber resilience assessment and some other types of things. We do have a number of new folks joining us today, so a little bit about System Source. So we've been around since 1981, and we work with IT professionals from South Central Pennsylvania all the way down through Maryland into the Washington, D.C. area. And folks a lot of times come to us when they need to acquire new IT technologies. So while we do work on the in-user computing side, laptops, desktops, printers, the bulk of what we do is in the IT data center, whether that data center is the traditional on-prem or in many of its cloud or other variants. So in Amazon Web Services, in Azure, been doing work in both of those areas for many years, as well as other places. So software as a service, co-location centers, other data centers. So regardless of where you put your resources, servers, storage, security, applications, regardless of where they are, we kind of help design install, manage, and support those kinds of resources across the cloud or kind of that whole rather data center environment, whether it's on-prem, cloud, or other variants. So we work with companies like Arctic Wolf to be able to do security-related work, and we work with Barracuda and Cisco and VMware and the whole Microsoft stack, Hewlett-Packard Enterprise, just to kind of name a few of the vendors that we work with to kind of help design solutions there. But people are acquiring to improve, not just to acquire. And so our consultants right there in the consult area kind of do that design work, implementation, security hardening, support types of services across the data center and cloud services. But we also do training with about 600 or 700 classes available at any one point on our website. And that's going to be in all the technologies I just mentioned, all the manufacturers I just mentioned, as well as several dozens of others. And all of our courses are available virtually, as well as many are available in person. So, and finally, Present is kind of where our kind of professional AV comes in. So all the Teams rooms, WebEx rooms, Zoom rooms, etc., huddle spaces, presentation rooms, conference centers, executive offices, auditoriums, etc., all those kinds of spaces where you're going to need large monitors and microphones and speakers and the design work and the installation work and all those features. That's what our presentation system group does. And finally, we maintain all the things I just talked about, either on a reactive basis, you call us when you need help under service and support, or on a proactive basis under managed services, where we are the IT department for dozens of clients in this region. So that's a little bit about System Source today. Some upcoming webinars, I'll drop these into the chat for the registration links, or when you get this deck, you can click right on these. There are clickable links, or go right to our website. So in a couple of weeks, we do have one that's coming up that's kind of an interesting one on Wi-Fi environments, but this one's focusing on large or difficult environments. So things like large auditoriums, houses of worship, stadiums, outdoor spaces, whether it's kind of industrial spaces or just large business areas. We've have done like large campgrounds, event spaces, those kinds of things. So all those kinds of environments present very difficult Wi-Fi challenges, but there are also places that Wi-Fi needs to work very well. So we have a lot of solutions that we can do in those environments. If that describes you or perhaps your facilities folks, you may want to sign up for that one. And then on the 12th, we're talking about migrating servers and storage to Azure. We did one a couple of weeks ago on security in Azure. If you're interested in that, you can jot that down in your evaluation as well. This will focus on moving over either for the first time or kind of taking from your pilot and going to the next step. So you may want to consider that one as well. And with that, let me go ahead and hand it over to Sean.
All right. Perfect. Looks like everybody can see my slides and you can hear me.
We're all set. Yes, we're all good. Thanks, Sean.
Yeah, we want to thank yourself and System Source for inviting us today, and then of course all of you attendees that are out there. So my name is Sean Roberts, and my title is Senior Systems Engineer, as you can see from the title slide here. I've been with Arctic Wolf just crossed my 5-year anniversary, so a little dangerous out there, and we'll get into it right now. With the agenda, this is really just a restatement from what Chris had shown earlier. I'm going to refer to it a little bit as a loose agenda, as in I'll cover all these topics, probably in this order, but some of them, such as the communication portion, we'll be touching on that through the various services that I'll go through. And for those that are a little bit unfamiliar with Arctic Wolf, there's a couple things that we can state out of the gate. One is our mission, which is kind of a lofty one. It's to end cyber risk. And you'll see this weaved into the rest of my presentation. But if we're going to make a grandiose statement like that, then we ought to at least be able to quantify what risk is, right, from a cybersecurity perspective. And really, we have these categories that are below. And I don't think everybody comes to market like this. So I think this is a good representation of where things are at, what's possible, and then how to cover everything. And I just want to state here a couple things. One thing to know about Arctic Wolf is we are an entirely services focused company. So we don't sell a product or tools. We offer that, and really, I know this is a very simple statement, but a service is a combination of technology and talent. Probably the same way that you're running your current IT departments with their various tools, and then the staff that supports those. So you can see the technology piece kind of has a leg on both sides, the risk assessment portion, which we'll be talking about in a second, and then risk mitigation. The helpful part about having a service, especially for us, is providing that contextualization. So together, and I think that we're underselling ourselves a little bit, and the folks in the security space, but we will put the assessment plus mitigation covering about 90% of total risk. I think it's a little bit higher than that, but we kind of give ourselves an A minus for a little bit of latitude. And then the final part that really covers that is risk transfer, which is also going to be a discussion point for the rest of this conversation. So with that said, if you get a traditional presentation from Arctic Wolf, we'll probably spend several minutes on this because it really encompasses everything in our portfolio. So remember, everything that we sell or offer is as a service, so all four of these categories. But I really want you to look at the first three, as in they all begin with this managed comment. So this is part of our service. I would call it our bread and butter. But I want to kind of take a little bit more of an unbiased approach when I talk about what you're looking at here. So just from a top-down perspective, this is what we believe at Arctic Wolf, and I also personally subscribe to this. This is the recipe for everything that you would need to run an enterprise class SOC, right? Security Operations Center. And, again, if I take the Arctic Wolf hat off, then I would say that each one of these is essential in covering the controls that are necessary. Oops, sorry, slide moved a little bit. All the controls that are necessary to, again, provide that risk mitigation portion. And so some folks will get this from vendor A, vendor B, vendor C, and so on. So again, being unbiased, all these things should be included. The nice thing that we come to the table with is offering all of these together. We're also going to be talking today about incident response, which is something I don't traditionally talk about in our presentations, but it is part of our service offering. And there's different reasons that you might need, and you might need that service for, which we'll go through in a second. So this is our portfolio. Some people might look at this as kind of a narrow focus and see that as a good thing. In other words, it's strictly focused on cybersecurity, right? We don't do operational security and other elements that do contribute to having a robust security plan. But it's also broad enough in a way that I can show you this. This is kind of where the portfolio unfolds. So when we talk about things, and again, I'll be talking to a lesser extent about managed detection and response, but these two serve in the category of detect, respond, recover, right? So what anybody would offer, and especially us, is a reduction in severity, a pretty significant one, right? So 90% reduction in severity or higher, like I said. Here's the thing, I always compare this to, say, auto insurance, because that's something that we all contend with, I guess. This is all predicated on an incident occurring, right? That you would need this service, or when this service would kick in, as well as incident response. These are predicated on unfortunately something bad happening. So I contrast that with things that can be done proactively, right? So what we're discussing is strictly reactive, and those can contribute to reducing the frequency of events, right? Not getting in that accident in the first place. And so there's a few elements of this. Again, we have our bread and butter on the managed side, managed risk, which we'll probably talk about at the end. So again, things in this box are a nice complement to that, to essentially, eliminate that as a whole. And then we'll also show you how, we cover, again, that last mile, that last 10%, however you want to look at that, the risk transfer piece. There's some elements with our warranty that are involved, and there's some elements that are consequential with regards to insurance. So next slide here. Getting into our cyber resilience assessment, and this is kind of the core of what we're looking to discuss here. And here's the thing, as opposed to all of our other services, this is actually a free or bundled service, which is kind of nice. So, we'll talk about this with our incident response jumpstart plan, and then some of our managed services. It doesn't matter which services or how many of them you subscribe to, you actually get this, which is a nice thing. And this is new for us. We introduced this late last year, the beginning of this year, if you will, and it's continued to be refined. What it's about is, just like, if we're going to stick with the auto analogies, everybody in tech's famous for auto analogies, right? But, if you're on a road trip, you always want to be able to know where you are, right? We've got all kinds of things that help us out today, on our phones. Google Maps, all that good stuff. But the same type of concept applies here, and that is mapping out, where you are, where your organization is in terms of resilience. And there's a couple of things that we support in that in terms of frameworks. So, everybody's familiar with the NIST standard. These are the folks that tell us how to keep time, right? But they have their cybersecurity foundation or frameworks, if you will, that have a set of controls and functions that are beyond that. And what this service is designed to do, so it's an interface plus the folks from the Arctic Wolf and System Source side to support you with this, is to index that for you, and we'll go into that a little bit, and also make it easy for you to input all of these. So making an easy way to understand and break down this framework. So you see two different versions here. Version 1.1, we'll actually talk a little bit more in this in a minute, was introduced in 2014. 2.0 was introduced in 2022, if you will. It was originally a request for info, so people would respond about things about how this was going to be ratified. And then we'll also have that CIS framework. So just kind of another way to look at that. I told you when these were introduced, the broad functions really have only changed a slight bit when we went from 1.1 to 2.0. So you have the things that are on the vulnerability management or the managed risk side, which are largely over here. So the identify and protect pies, right? And then if you remember me mentioning from before, on the managed detection response side, as well as incident response, that again, predicated on incident, so detecting that, responding to that, and then recovering. That was the 1.1 model. The only thing that's really changed, or the most significant change, is the addition of this governance function right in the center. So that's the broad arching one. There are some changes to the categories and subcategories underneath to just reflect the changing of times. This is the current standard. So why is this important? Why is this even interesting? You'll see in a second. Not only does this give you a way to see where you are on that road trip, it has another couple things that fall out from that. And one is the ability to improve your insurance rating and or reduce the cost of your cybersecurity insurance expenses if you have that or plan in place. And then additionally, be able to recover and have a plan, which we refer to as our incident response jumpstart plan later on. The CIS controls, if you're not familiar with that, a similar kind of function in terms of being able to identify and map your vulnerabilities. So Center for Information Security, this has gone through several different variants. We're up to version 8, if you will, and it has 18 broad functions or controls, and it is able to basically map common vulnerabilities that are out there to your environments, right, to your assets. So we'll talk about that as well. So we're actually going to flip over and do a little bit of live demo. So I'm going to switch screens real quick. And if I pull this off correctly, then we'll be looking at my screen here. So this is kind of the introduction to the interface. Now, your first assessment of this may be, okay, so this looks like a tool. And here's the thing. So we have a light version of this, which you can, basically access for free and utilize this yourself. But it's completely a self-governing type of tool at that point. The actual full-blown cyber resilience assessment, the one that I said is bundled with all of our other services, this includes, again, not only the access to this tool, but our assistance as well in filling that out. So what kinds of things can you get out of this? If we switch from CIS to, say, NIST 2.0, which I think will be a little bit more interesting here, you can see, and this is just the way that this is spec'd out with the NIST standard. So you see that the broad arching functions, GV, the governance one, that's the new one, and then each one of the subcategories that are below. And if you hover over it, you see these value ranges here. So this has a whole capability. You can go into each individual category here and look at them. So if we just take one of the first ones, governance and organizational content, we could look at this and then view all of the subcategories. So, the listing of the subcategories, this is obviously just coming straight from the NIST 2.0 spec, but the ability to come in here and then quickly provide where you are today is kind of the function of this. So you can go into each one of the policy definitions and point out where you are. Same with activation and enforcement. So you can see different categories based on the percentage of assets that this applies to, and then the consistent review and reporting category. So we provide a maximum value here, and this is kind of a simplistic one. It gives you the weight, how it counts, all of those good things. So it becomes a very simple way to go through this process and also get familiar with NIST version 2.0. There's a second part in here too that I actually find really interesting. So it's kind of just like that recipe that I showed you before when we talked about our own portfolio, Arctic Wolf's, for example. So this one is more a broader stroke, if you will, based on that. So you see each one of these tiles, which have categories on there, and you can also see kind of at a glance things that Arctic Wolf has or offers in their portfolio, and then things that we don't, right? So we're big enough or understand our role enough to say, hey, for example, we're not an antivirus provider, right? But you can come in here, click on this, you can supply what vendor you're currently using in there. And of course, there's all the options that we see out in the field, also the subcategories behind that. So what we're actually providing is if you just take antivirus as a general product, we're mapping that back to the NIST version 2 in this case subcategory as well. So you can see how it applies, but more from a different perspective. I like looking at this just because, again, if you look at it from a recipe perspective, these are all the different things that you should at least be considering, if not have in place. And of course, we offer some things, in our portfolio as examples as well. So managed detection response, you can see kind of the categories that covers. And again, by virtue of picking Arctic Wolf, and insurance carriers know this, it contributes substantially to your coverage in each one of those categories. So at the end of the day, it's a real simple way to get a bead on where you're at, and then again, see your progress over time as you continue to, interface with this and adjust based on different categories you're meeting or different percentages of asset classes that are there. And kind of the final trick that this does is the insurability rating piece. So again, if you're saying, you're going to go through here, provide all kinds of documentation and an assessment of where you are today, what we've produced is the ability to basically create an insurability rating document, which I'll show you an example of in a second, that you can deliver directly to your insurance carrier. So what's the purpose in that? The purpose in that is that, if you go to a carrier, we should even take a step back. The initial problem is that cybersecurity insurance premiums are increasing. Why? We all know why, because we all get to read it in the news or hear about it. All kinds of different organizations, whether you're, a casino, whether you're, a healthcare center, or whether you're a credit union, everyone's getting affected. So everybody's going to get that upcharge in premium that occurs almost every year. What has it been? Almost 100% year over year since the pandemic started. So not good from a subscriber perspective. So the counter to that is being able to produce a document that you can deliver to your carrier and say, look, I went through this, I've mapped this out against NIST version 2.0, which is the gold standard, even insurance carriers agree, and here's why I'd like to argue or negotiate that cost down. So that's like the least thing that we could do out of that, and it's become very helpful as well. So let's see if I can shift smoothly back to where we were. Looks like we're back. Whoops, wrong one. And we are back. All right, great. Not too many problems there. Again, I was going to show you some examples of those documents, so just kind of a quick page through that. Again, out of that service that I just mentioned, the Cyber Resilience Assessment Tool, it generates this document naturally. So this one is against the NIST version 2.0 spec, which you can see up at the top, and it really is just a way to document point in time against all the broad arching categories, right? So you see all the functions that are prefaced there, GV, so on and so forth. This goes out to about 8 pages here. So this is just something that you can produce naturally out of this. Again, organic living document as well. And then the second piece, as I mentioned before, the insurability rating. So we're on the panel of 30 different insurance carriers, which means they're aware of us, they're aware of our name. And I should probably make as an aside too, why? And that'll be a little bit to come here, but the short answer on that is because we provide incident response. So carriers will often put us on the short list if you are in an incident response situation, i.e. there was an incident, there was a breach, things went catastrophic, you needed to go to your insurance company and say, who best to utilize for this? We're on that short list, just as an example, just like a body shop would be recommended by your auto insurance carrier if you were involved in an auto accident. But this document is something that they'll recognize not only from our name, but the way that we kind of break all that stuff down. So again, just by virtue of utilizing this, and again, with our guidance, with system source guidance, getting this completed, and then providing that living document for the purposes of getting that rating and of course consequentially your premiums down. So I mentioned incident response. This is a service that we offer. This is independent of the managed services, and this is independent of that cyber resilience assessment document. Honestly, if you had taken the time to do like a cyber resilience assessment and you're working with system source in a current or future capacity, the recommendation there is to get managed services to avoid this. But again, we're kind of doing a reverse presentation today, talking about some of the things that we do outside of those managed services. Number one being incident response. So a good thing to do is just qualify or provide in detail what is incident response, at least according to us. I like to use that word catastrophic. It usually means there is some inability for the organization to continue to sell, to provide care, to provide benefits, to provide anything. Usually insurance is involved, which means a couple things need to happen. Number one is what needs to happen is you need to have digital forensics, right? You're going to have to provide documentation to your carrier, as in, this is what happened, this is when we knew about it, all of that good stuff. But for us as a service, that's not the only thing that we do. We also can provide restoration if necessary. Again, why is that necessary? If you've got ransomware, if again it moved east-west or had lateral movement and it affected a large number of your workstations, desktops, cloud instances, any of those things, and the best thing to do instead of surgically remove the malware is just to start from scratch, do a full restore. You're going to need help with that, right? You're going to need resources. That's part of that. And then there's some things that you probably weren't expecting that we do. You probably glanced over at the number on the right-hand side, but among all of these services or subcomponents of the service includes threat actor negotiation, right? And so believe it or not, you can negotiate ransomware demands. And again, this is really not our virtue in just strictly being able to negotiate. It's the fact that we've worked with a number of other organizations, getting them put back together again, which required that. And so behind the scenes, we have that experience. We often know the folks, the bad actors that we're working with. We know what they'll accept. We know the timing of when to ask, all those good things. So it can be very helpful, obviously reducing the cost of that, because it's already pretty bad if you had to utilize incident response in the first place. So this is more of a defining the problem, right? And then how Arctic Wolf can address that if it reaches this point. So there's a couple of things that organizations have done to counter that. Number one are what they call traditional IR retainers. So the idea is, and this can sometimes come at the recommendation of an insurance carrier, say, look, if things go catastrophic, like we just described, you're going to want to have a retainer. So if you're not familiar with this, and that's okay, not everybody is, they can tend to be a large upfront cost. Give you an idea of that, typically in the 5-figure range on an annual basis. So, with that, it, unfortunately, is kind of throwaway money. I mean, almost worse than insurance in the sense that, if you don't use it, you really just threw away, all of these dollars that could have been applied toward services, to tools, to, additional personnel, all that good stuff, right? But you needed to have it because if you don't have an IR retainer and you have to go with an IR service, typically, and I'm talking outside of our service, you're talking strictly time and materials. You're often talking $7, $8, $9, $1,000 an hour, again, because you didn't have a retainer in place, and everybody knows like you need help now, so they can charge a bundle for it, unfortunately. And then you've got the response time, which again, if you're looking from your carrier at different IR services, you may have to reach out to them and say, here's the situation I'm in, what's the price? And it may take 2 to 4 hours to turn around an SLA. And they may not have spent any time with you up front just to plan for these activities, like who to call, what run book should I follow? What's the chain of command? Which servers need to be restored? All of those things. So this is where IR retainers have fallen down. So as you can guess, we've kind of got a response to that. And we do. We have what we call our IR Jumpstart Retainer. So I just want to do a little pause and checkpoint talking about, what we are and all the different kind of terms and verbiage that I've thrown out here. So there's incident response, right? We talked about that, which is I made no plan. I need it now, $700 to $1,000 an hour, probably a slow SLA, right? That's kind of the worst circumstance. Again, we do provide those services because A lot of organizations don't have the proper protections in place, right? And then I talked about the second piece, which is an IR retainer. We do not, as an Arctic Wolf, does not offer IR retainers. Again, we talked before about where they failed. So the point here is that we offer what we call an IR Jumpstart retainer. This is just a unique name to us, and you probably had a chance to glance over this, but I'll just review again what makes this different. Number one, what makes this different, it's not even on this slide, is the fact that it's inexpensive, right? So, you know, the retail or street price for this, you know, is typically in the $5,000 or $6,000 range total, right? And it includes a retaining portion of it as well. So how does that all work out? How are you doing it for that price? A couple things. Number one is we heard the problem with the SLAs. We are strictly on a 1 hour SLA response time, right? So if it does get to a catastrophic point, you need the IR help, we will provide you a quote directly, and it will come in 1 hour for everybody. Even honestly, if you're not an Arctic Wolf customer, same thing. So across the board, 1 hour. Insurance approved, kind of mentioned this already. We're on the panel with 30 different carriers. They just know who we are. If you want a little background on that, Arctic Wolf acquired a company 2 to 3 years ago called Tetra Defense that was strictly in this business. It's almost run as a wholly separate department underneath. Obviously, it has some cool things with us because, you know, having an IR team under the same umbrella as the rest of Arctic Wolf makes our managed services better, right? If we see the problems or the volume of problems or the types of problems or incidents that are coming in, we can feed that back into where do we need to focus on our managed services. So that's kind of a little behind the scenes thing that helps us. We have a secure portal, which I'll show you some examples of. Won't be a live demo, but a little bit of a plan behind that. So kind of answering that communication part of our agenda. Preferred pricing. So here's the thing with this. Our IR services are strictly $295 an hour, right? So they're not 700, they're not 1,000. It does kind of sound high in some regards, but again, it's really half the time, or half the time, but most of the time it's about half the price, if not less, if you actually do need to use it. We also have like bundled services, and I hate to say it, but I am going to say it, is that 55% of breaches that occurred that require our incident response services are business email compromise. Simply that. It happens so often, it's even got its own acronym now, business email compromise, BEC. So in those cases, we know pretty well, just because they occur so often, we know exactly what needs to be done. There's almost a fixed flat rate for those services for most situations. And then, of course, what are we going to do that's different? We're talking about the incident readiness, run books, plan review, and security assessment. So what does that look like? And again, we'll just go with a couple data points and a couple screenshots here. We talked about this, our presence on the insurance panels. We talked about this, reduction in ransomware demands. So this is kind of why trust Arctic Wolf, why us specifically. And then a couple things that haven't been mentioned so far. We can help recover 15% faster, right? Again, if you're in an incident response situation, you know, time is money, certainly, and that's going to be a big factor here. And then also NPS, a lot of even tools vendors out there will boast about our NPS score. So if you're not familiar with that, I don't want to spend a whole lot of time on it. It's a score range from 0 to 100. You know, if you're an airline, you typically never get out of the basement, which is like a 20 NPS scores. You know, airlines don't provide really great customer service, at least from a polling perspective. But when it comes to, you know, what do our customers after an IR engagement with us provide as an NPS score, it's 77, mostly because we do all these comprehensive things, like we're providing everything beginning to end, negotiations, recovery, providing RCAs after the fact, providing best practices and all of those things. That's what kind of gives us a high score there. But again, what does it look like? A little bit of a similar interface as you saw from CRA. So just as a little bit of a walkthrough. I hate to describe this like this, but essentially the planner and plan review part, it's like a will, you know, a little bit dark, but it's imperative to spend that time up front to get this part right. So you can see there's these categories up at the top that we help collect all this information for. Again, this is a service. So we're performing these activities. We're guiding you through this. I know it's not super difficult to enter an email and phone number, but it's just collecting it, figuring out who should be, you know, provided for this. And then you can see here, you know, it gets a little bit more sophisticated in terms of, hey, at least we know who we're going to use for our provider if we should need that. for incident response, who might be external in terms of helping us handle the litigation side. So just documenting this stuff. The technical points of this, again, this is where we're a little bit more helpful in terms of that that service piece or the resources to help guide you through this, uploading those documents, uploading and making sure that all these things remain current, right? So not just a point in time. Incident escalation. So kind of who's going to be involved, who's going to be called, what's the chain of custody, all that good stuff. Again, just like a will, just nailing all this stuff down ahead of time. In some cases, there might just be one small thing that you weren't thinking about that we know about, having gone through these with other folks, that maybe just give you a little bit of pause. But again, time that you're not under pressure to get all this stuff sorted and documented. So that all comes with, again, that IR Jumpstart plan. And then, of course, the most important part is providing documentation based on that. So step-by-step workflows, including an actual run book, saying, hey, what needs to be done when and why and how, all that stuff is laid out. And it's, of course, bespoke. It's tied to your organization specifically in terms of those contexts and that sort of thing. All right, so risk transfer, and this is kind of where we're wrapping up. We're kind of going a little bit in reverse, but with those things in place, just to kind of show you, we just behind the scenes kind of assess folks in different risk buckets, if you will. And maybe this is time to kind of reflect back on your own organization in terms of, where am I at, and what things do I have in place, and what things should I add would make us more resilient or stronger. So, we have a way to document all this stuff, but we also have a way to just kind of assess your organization. And this is something that, if you haven't yet, you can engage a system source, talk about kind of the things that you might want to be looking at, thinking about, utilizing for this. And again, we don't provide all of this, but again, it's a recipe for a successful enterprise class security operations program. Again, so for example, Arctic Wolf doesn't do MFA. We certainly collect logs from that. The patch management, that sort of thing, we do provide, and that's going to be a little bit of our topic here. We talked about the incident response plans and all that. I think one thing I want to highlight here, not just read this to you, but when you look at stronger protection, and this is kind of where we, Arctic Wolf, meet people a lot of the times, is they've invested or leveraged a solid or decent endpoint detection and response tool, right? And so some examples of that would be like Microsoft Defender, CrowdStrike, SentinelOne. There is a little bit of overlap with what we do in terms of, and I say we as in Arctic Wolf, for managed detection and response. But I think the most important thing is that these serve as input to that managed detection and response. So whereas this is only just looking at one element, maybe think about it like the Ring camera on your front door. Great solution, great tool, but doesn't handle everything, right? Your Ring camera doesn't contextualize against, what's going on with your door locks and your windows and other internal security cameras. That's kind of the point of managed detection response. That's the overarching piece here. But if you're looking at, what's a playbook or what would be the security journey to get from what you might be having minimally today to a stronger or best protection methodology. And so this is just really food for thought, the things that you should have in place. And then it also provides like the beginning of a conversation about what those pieces should include, right? Like definitely the incident response plan, great idea, simple, relatively inexpensive compared to, what an incident response situation might be. Vulnerability management as well. Some people kind of stop short, like they lean heavy again into that detection response piece, but don't give this enough credence. Same thing with security training, good security training, right? So that's important. Anyway, we'll kind of move on from that. But here's the net of it all, right? So the objective here is that risk transfer. So remember, we offer services that reduce the frequency of events. We offer services that reduce the severity of events. And then again, like I said, we sort of give ourselves an A-, and I think that's being very, very liberal on the grading scale. But how do you get to that last 10%? How do you cover that? If we're going to say something like end cyber risk, again, it's through risk transfer. So we offer two pieces of this. One is if you utilize our managed services, which we'll kind of talk about at the end here, and I'll be wrapping up shortly. But we have packages and plans that provide up to 1.5 million in terms of warranty. So what's that good for? I'm definitely using the term warranty and not insurance, as in this is not a replacement for that. But again, if you can, I love this mouse moving me around a little bit. Again, if you can get that first 1.5 million covered, by us, you can substantially reduce. Well, you can get a reduction in your premium, and that would come as a virtue of increasing the deductible, for example, or by just demonstrating that you have those controls in place, i.e., the managed controls, as in I've got managed detection response, I've got a vulnerability management solution, a la managed risk. You can get up to 25% reduction on that. And these are real numbers, right? I mean, 25% could be enough to pay for these services, and in some cases have a little bit left over. So kind of the final part on this presentation is really going to be about those managed solutions. Like I said, I'm usually providing this presentation in reverse, right? So the first one here is the managed risk piece. Again, kind of where does this fit in? It's an AKA against vulnerability management, and that is to really cover these overarching functions, as in identify and protect. So these are all the steps that you can take in advance of an incident to avoid that from happening in the first place. For us, I call it a triad. It's really 3 points of defense. Number one being host-based vulnerability assessment. So what we do is, we have a part of our service which is an agent to basically collect all this information. What does that gain you? Number one, the most simple thing that it does, and people may not have in place yet, is an asset discovery, asset inventory solution, right? So knowing what you have in the first place, that's like almost step zero. But then once you have that information, being able to assess and map that back, again, we're using the CIS controls. We're looking at common vulnerabilities, those sorts of things, and exploits that would map to these specific hosts. So we're not only taking all this data, crunching it, we're providing the team members, again, because this is a service, you're always combining technology with the resources, we're able to contextualize that. So we can answer kind of the questions that you're looking for in the first place, which is, look, hey, Arctic Wolf, I've got 2 hours to really spend over this month on what patches would be best applied to give me kind of the 80-20 rule, right? So if I tackle all of my, as you see down here in the bottom, my critical or high alerts, number one is which ones are those? So we provide that. And then which ones should I address like this month? And the big thing there is the context, not only just being able to shortcut, provide the almost AI summary explanation, only this is from humans, providing the context in terms of this is what we're seeing in the wild. So if we see an exploit, and again, it's not just host-based, although I've only been talking about that, it could be network-based as well, which can encompass anything from individual servers that all of a sudden have ports that are open that shouldn't have been open or weren't open from yesterday, i.e. might be an example of a command and control or C2 situation that happened already. We heard about that several years ago, the SolarWinds attack. So these kinds of things are in response to that, to make sure that that data is at least being analyzed, logged, and then contextualized. There's a cloud element of that too, which is really just a derivative of the network piece or the endpoint piece. But again, for us, we're not ignoring your cloud environments, whether you're AWS, Azure, GCP, or any combination. There's a portion of that. And CSPM can also have insurance implications. So I want to mention that. So providing that you have those controls in place and that they're documented, right? And then there's kind of the simple stuff. But these simple stuff, these simple threads that if they get pulled on can really unravel. What I mean by that, this account takeover risk is also providing not just internal vulnerability assessments, but external vulnerability assessments. So that could be anything that front facing on the internet, like if you're a retailer and you have those type of systems, or looking deep into the dark web and looking for any evidence of your organization's domain information and that sort of thing. So all of that, and then of course providing the documented benchmarking. Last piece of the managed services, and this is kind of funny, again, reverse presentation. This is our bread and butter. This is what most people seek us out for. Again, if you don't have something like this in place, I highly encourage you to take up a separate conversation with all of us, and we can go over this. But again, this is more of the response piece, right? So this is if we see something, again, could be anything from business email compromise, could be a firewall exploit that's become known. Again, could be a sophisticated supply chain attack. You need to have something in place that, number one, can detect that. And that's a big piece too. Like all you have here is the word detect. But for us, what we offer is the comprehensive visibility. Again, separate conversation, but a shortcut on that is being able to look at everything. I kind of did a little prelude to this when we talked about endpoint, like endpoint being like that Ring camera. Everybody kind of got excited about that. Put those in place. Certainly a huge contribution to covering some of your attack surface, but not all of it. So if you're not sure what those other pieces are, we'll be happy to tell you. But again, those could be anything from identity, those could be your firewalls, that could be looking at network flow traffic. Again, the name of the game here is that you don't just have a single element to cover everything. There is nothing out there that does that, but you need to have several different inputs into a comprehensive managed detection response solution. That way you're not missing anything. You can do the follow the breadcrumb thing, and of course 24/7 coverage. So in terms of our portfolio, that's kind of the whole thing. Last thing I'll probably touch on real quick here is going to be what makes us different. And again, these are part of kind of a longer conversation, but really to describe it from a nutshell is going to be security operations platform. So if you're familiar with the idea of a SIM, if you have a SIM today, if you're contemplating a SIM in the future, maybe to put a pause on that, come talk to us, because ours includes that element, that piece, that tool, so that you don't have to worry about it. I call it just getting out of the SIM business. So if you're in it, get you out of it. If you haven't, great place to be. Come talk to us. The other piece here is the concierge delivery model. So we're the only ones that offer that. I know that's kind of a lot of marketing speak here, but again, I'm going to try to roll this up in a very simplistic statement, which is that we provide a named team of people to help you. And that includes everything from the very beginning of this presentation, the cyber resilience assessment, working with you, working with people, again, to help shortcut it, to provide that knowledge, that foundational knowledge, and then also what we see out there from other organizations your size in your industry, all of those things. And then the final part here, and I think this is often overlooked, and really, I think this should be demanded out of anybody that's in our business, and that is the security journey portion. And again, it's just like being able to, number one, meet you where you're at, so understand what pieces you have in place, being able to provide some good input on what you can do to change that, and then also being able to quantify that and say, okay, if you put these controls, these changes, you put this service in place, this is what it's going to gain you. It's going to gain you your better insurability rating, a better favorability, better pricing, all of that stuff. And then, of course, the main objective, which is just improve your posture overall, cover more of that threat landscape. So again, if these pique your interest, please have a conversation with us as well, because I think this could be very valuable if you don't have those things in place. So I will leave it at that. I think Chris may come back in here and join our conversation. But any questions? Happy to answer. I know we covered a lot of things that Arctic Wolf does, but I appreciate your patience sticking around, and happy to answer any questions on that.
Thank you very much, Sean. I appreciate it. So at this point, we don't have any other questions, but I'll give you chances to type a couple in as I talk about on the Q&A slide. So just a kind of reminder, there's a evaluation which you'll get. It literally takes 2 minutes if you move slowly, but we try to make it fun by pulling a couple out that have been completed for a $50 Amazon gift card or one to your favorite restaurant. You'll tell us what that restaurant is, of course. So some of the things that you'll see for additional information, or you can write it in. One is this will be on the evaluation, is more information, if you will, on the cyber resilience assessment, or additional information about the incident response piece, or if you just want additional information about Arctic Wolf, as well as a security planning workshop, which is a great place to kind of talk about where you are on your security journey. And finally, if you want some security training related courses through our Learning Center, which we talked about there. So it looks like we've taken care of all the questions right in the way of the presentation itself, Sean. So I want to say thank you very much to Sean for his time and information, but most of all, thanks to each of your time for participating today. Hope the pizza was good and the information was great. So I'll give you back an extra 10 minutes on your day. Hope you have a great afternoon. Thanks, everyone.
Yep, thank you.